Hey everyone, can you guys hear me okay? Am I audible? Too loud? Too annoying? No? Okay, sounds good. The perfect amount of annoying. Cool. My name is Shreyas. I work at this, it's super fancy, right? I'm like, how do I see what's on the screen? My name is Shreyas. I work at the Near Foundation. I head up communities at Near. The talk today is about putting the we in Web3. We, as you know, is a programming language which is written in, I'm just kidding. Putting the we in Web3 is all about community, right? We're not going to talk about code. We're going to talk about how we build communities and how we gather people and get people interested in our project. So this is a bit about me. Got into the Web3 space in 2014. Built open source and developer communities for the better part of my career, both in Web3 and Web2. Worked with a bunch of Web3 companies as well, including Constellation Network, CoinList, to name a few. Joined the Near Foundation almost 2 years back. It's been a wild ride, and now head communities at Near. Quick show of hands. How many of you are here familiar about Near Protocol? Have at least heard the name? Okay, some of that, cool. This was very different when we first started out. We had to beg, borrow, and steal developers, get people interested in what we do, and really go out and tell them that, hey, come attend our talks, come talk to us, come build on Near. And seeing that evolution the last 2 years has been pretty phenomenal. So here's a very quick overview of what we're going to do today, right? A bird's eye view of what we're going to talk about. We're going to start with what's Near. So just like contextualizing what I do and the stuff that I work on and why we do this, right? Then we're going to talk about communities in the Web3 space. How many of you here, again, quick show of hands, right? How many of you here work full-time in the Web3 space? Okay, how many of you are new to the Web3 space, sort of exploring? Nice. I see a bunch of people with their hands down forever. They're like, I don't know why I'm here. Just like going through an existential crisis, which is fine, right? I've been there. And it's super annoying when speakers ask you to do stuff, right? There was a lot of sessions where they ask you to move around, like stretches. I'm not going to ask you to do any of those, right? So you can chill, listen if you want, walk out, all of that is cool with me. So yeah, we're going to talk about community metrics. Anyone here works, full-time on communities, like you build communities? Okay, some folks. So we're going to talk about what do we measure in communities, right? Any founders in the room? Anyone who's a founder, CEO, working on your own Web2, Web3? No? Okay. Cool. And then we're going to talk about education, which is super important, right? And then if we have time, we will take questions. So, the why and what of Near, right? Why are we doing what we do? Starting with what are we? How many of you folks are familiar with Ethereum? Yeah, I see some folks like, what's he asking? Ethereum? Obviously, we're all familiar with Ethereum, right? So yeah, we're very, if you don't know what Near does, we're very similar to Ethereum in state that, we're a proof of stake protocol, already proof of stake. We are a layer 1, which enables developers to build cool stuff on top of us. We are simple, secure, and scalable. I'm not going to dive into the technical details much, but our vision is that of an open web, right? What is an open web? Right? What do you mean by build an open web? That sounds very ambitious and, in other words, very vague, right? A vision of building a world where people are in complete control of their data, identity, and power of governance, right? How many of you here are familiar with the concept of DAOs? Decentralized autonomous organizations? Okay, yeah, cool. So yeah, we're going to talk a bit about structures of building communities in the form of DAOs. But yeah, this is what we do. For the folks that are familiar with Near, if you want to check out what's built on Near, you can go to awesomenear.com, which I don't think you can see because of the thing here, but it's awesome as in awesomenear.com. The role of the Near Foundation. I told you that I work at the Near Foundation. Have you guys heard about the Ethereum Foundation? Is that something that you're familiar with? Okay, yeah. So the role is fairly similar in terms of what we do. We raise awareness about Near. We support projects that are building on top of Near. And we provide a very clear and safe path to decentralization, right? This is, including governance, including all the support that projects and builders need in this ecosystem. So, types and traits of communities. Anyone here, a quick show of hands again. I promise you, the only thing I'm going to make you do is show of hands, right? There's not going to be stretching involved, there's no screaming around, there's no running around the room in circles, right? You can chill in your own place. If you feel like it, put your hand up, both your hands up, all that's fine. Quick show of hands in terms of people that are part, like if you consider yourself part of a Web2 community, right? It could be a cycling community, it could be a startup community, it could be your apartment WhatsApp group. Okay, some folks, are you guys not part of like family WhatsApp groups? That's also a community, right? Sounds good, thank you. So this is the one that I've sort of outlined here are traditionally communities that we see in the Web2 space, right? So you would have communities of interest. Let's say I'm interested in cycling, right? Our friend has a very important call. I was just waiting for him to finish that. You done?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So yeah, if you're part of, let's say, a cycling community, right? That's a community of interest, right? Community of practice. Let's say you are an engineer or you're a doctor, right? You're in the same sort of field and profession. That's sort of a community of practice. And then you have community of circumstance, right? Which is you're all undergoing a shared experience, right? It could be a medical illness. It could be something that you're undergoing emotionally, right? And there's a community around that. And the reason I bring that up is because Web3 communities are almost like all-encompassing, because we're all here at Web3Conf because we're interested in Web3. We're all here because we're working on something or interested in engaging the idea of Web3, right? Which makes it a community of practice. But also, we're all in this as a community of circumstance, right? A bear market and bull market affects our emotions and sentiments, right? And then you have a bunch of like types and traits of communities in here. So there are project communities, there are regional communities, there are product communities. And the difference between like a project and product community is that Near is sort of an ecosystem, right? It's an ecosystem on which people are building cool stuff, right? And they all have their own individual communities. And then you have, theme-based communities, right? Which is, let's say I'm interested in social tokens or DAOs or NFTs, right? There could be a niche around that subject, and I'm interested in chatting just about that. And then you have DAOs, which is sort of like a trait of a community. It's not a type, but it's sort of something that you can implement within your own community. And then you have community mitosis, which is an important or interesting factor of rather like big communities, where you see large communities sort of breaking down into smaller communities, which is something that I find super interesting, in the sense that communities organically then decide, okay, let's say, developers in Bangalore, right, is a community, right? And then the developers in Bangalore community gets large enough that at some point you would have, JavaScript developers in Bangalore and Python developers in Bangalore as sort of a subset that evolves. That's what I sort of mean by community mitosis. Okay, cool. What is the Near community? You're talking about community. You're talking about all this stuff. What does that mean in terms of what Near is doing? So let's quickly dive into that. Right. The fundamental difference in terms of how we think about communities, and this is in terms of my background as well. Right. I sort of come from this very weird intersection of like Web 2 as well as Web 3 and open source developer communities. So this hopefully, any marketers in the room? Anyone who does marketing, social media? Cool, okay, a couple of folks. Any trained marketers, like marketing MBA, that kind of thing, like fancy marketers? No? Okay, cool. You guys are cool, you guys are not saying you're not fancy, right? But yeah, just wanted to understand and contextualize this sort of diagram, right? If you're into marketing, can you guys read this? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. It says Near will follow a hybrid model. And so this is what's called a branded house, right? So think Google. Google has, Google has what Google has. Right? I don't need to explain that. And then you have house of brands like P&G, for example, right? It has Tide. Have you seen the Tide? Yeah? Actually, I don't think that's Tide. Maybe I'm wrong. And then you have Folgers, Pampers. Pampers fans? Nobody? Okay. Anyway, man. And then you have Coca-Cola, right? Coca-Cola is pretty interesting because Coke, as this mega conglomerate, has Coca-Cola as a product. But then also in the shelves, you'll see them competing with other products, sort of like an illusion of competition while it's literally their own products, which is, Minute Maid, Sprite, and, Frito-Lays and all of that, right? Stay hydrated, please drink water. Aerated drinks are not that great. But that's how we sort of think about communities, right? We look at near community as this, mega sort of umbrella or ecosystem of communities. And then you have smaller communities like guilds, right, which is super niche and subject-focused and like topic and theme-based. So you have create-based guild, you have the cypherpunk guild for like privacy and security enthusiasts, you have the human guild for gaming and creators, and all of that. So that's how we sort of brand ourselves in terms of communities. We're okay, in fact, if you go to the other hall upstairs, you'll see a Near booth, which is entirely run by the community, right? As Near Foundation, we are, just supporting them. But this is, what you see there is a bunch of projects, ecosystem and contributors building on the Near ecosystem running that, which I think is pretty cool. Whereas all the others are run by employees. So that's our fundamental difference in terms of how we think about communities. I mentioned guilds, right? What are guilds? Anyone familiar with general guilds in the ecosystem? Okay, a couple of folks, yeah. Any gamers in the house? I don't know if I consider myself as a gamer, but... Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I'm in that board as well. I like gaming, but I suck at it, but I would consider myself as a gamer, right? But yeah, if you're familiar with the idea of guilds in the gaming world, right? And if you look at the comparison between like the crypto and gaming universe, there's a lot of like intersection, right? Right from the way that we live our lives on Discord, basically, which is inherited from the gaming community, right? To all of the early adopters of this technology, which is gamers, right? They are sort of the ones that led this evolution. And that's where the idea of guilds came in, right? Which is, if you have a Counter-Strike guild, how many of you have played Counter-Strike before? Okay, nice. Counter-Strike guild, right? Think you will have the best of the best in like, in an ideal world, right? I'm not saying in your friends group there'll be an assassin, there'll be a sniper, all of that. But in an ideal world, you would have like an Avengers-like team, right? Who has honed in on their trade, craft, and skills in terms of specific ideas. That's what we want to, aspire to build with the idea of guilds. So we have a bunch of guilds in the ecosystem. You can check them out on our website. Community by the numbers, again, the slides are a bit outdated, but we've distributed about $5 million in funding deployed to guilds and DAOs in sort of decentralized fashion. There is accountability checks and balances in place for them to report their metrics and whatnot. We distributed funds for On-Chain Fund, which is, I'll come to later, but a DAO for the Ukraine war, right? We have a bunch of guilds, 150 plus guilds across the ecosystem with 250,000 plus members across the different guilds and communities that we run. There's also a legal guild, for instance, which I think is pretty cool because it's very hard to get lawyers to do something together, but yeah. So how do we measure community health, right? Okay, I see a bunch of new people in the room. Again, repeating the question, any community builders, community managers in the house? Okay. You've been here all along, dude. Cool. Okay, in terms of community building, right? If you work at, it's not a unique challenge for Web3, right? It's something that's perennially existed for Web2 companies as well. The ROI of communities, right? The question of like, okay, what's the return of investment? Especially if you're a startup, right? Having to like spend your energy trying to justify that community is important is a very uphill battle, right? And so then you start looking at metrics, right? You say, okay, is engagement the thing that I'm judged on? Do I get my next promotion, paycheck, or resources to my team if I get engagement? Then you're like, okay, what if people are cribbing and bitching about stuff on my Discord? That's technically engagement, right? But yeah, it's a very easy trap to fall into in terms of building metrics for your community. So how do we measure community metrics, right? And what does that look like? So if you're in a traditional, like let's say Web2 product building, technology developer sort of space, you sort of understand somewhat this sort of funnel, right? It's the whole idea of like growth, engagement, and retention, right? When you build a product, you want people to use it, you want to start people engaging with it, and you want to reduce churn, right? You want to keep them for as long as you can, right? It's the whole idea between, like, let's say, Apple's, theory of like having users go from the journey of like, users to becoming evangelists of Apple, right? So this is something that I'm guessing a lot of you feel like you're familiar with, right, when you see this. Now, what's the Web3 angle to this, right? One of the things that we've looked at a lot is funding. So this has a very big caveat to this, right? The idea of funding is that the base layer of all of this is that there is some accountability metrics in place, right? If you have those accountability metrics in place, you can then say that funding can be a proxy for activity in your project, right? Let's say you're saying that, okay, I'm distributing $100,000, in a quarter for the creatives community, right? And assuming that there are people looking at checks and balances and ensuring that people are doing distributing funds in the right manner, you can almost say that, okay, I've issued $100,000. The next month they're almost utilizing $200,000, which means that their activity is increasing. They're doing something good, right? Again, the big caveat there is that accountability in terms of funding. And then there is on-chain activity, right? We, as much as Web3 community builders crib about not having access to data, right? You have this amazing opportunity of like pseudonymous data, which is you know wallet addresses, smart contracts. You can sort of build a dashboard to visualize what that looks like, right? Which I think is pretty unique. And so we look at that a lot. Guild business models are pretty interesting in the sense that I would right now I would totally take credit for it, but we would admit that when we started guilds, we had no idea what would it evolve and become, right? And the idea is that, and the reason I mentioned that is that we've had guilds that went on to become businesses, and they were able to like generate money and revenue, right? Which I think is extremely cool, right? When a community goes from a stage of like just a random bunch of people hanging out in a WhatsApp or like a Telegram or a Discord server to like actually being able to charge money for providing a service, right? And creating value. I think money is a very important indicator of like value creation. And so building that out is pretty fascinating. Now, there's this third element here, which is market conditions. This is or rather like the uncontrollable dimension, right? Which is no matter how great a community builder you are, no matter how fascinating you are at community building and building like truly meaningful and impactful communities, this stuff hits you from behind. You don't even see it coming, right? Market conditions really throw your metrics for a toss. So if you're saying that you want people to engage with your community, build communities, and like join in, like if it's a bear market in like 1 week because of like people over leveraging and whatnot, it can almost like turn your metrics around and like throw it right out the window, right? So there's only a certain amount of things in your control, which is the first two. The third one is really something that you have to like factor in and not necessarily change, right? Just acknowledge the fact that the others exist and I can't do anything about it. So yeah, and I think just like bringing it back to like ground reality, right? We've talked about metrics, we've talked about all this fancy stuff in the community building space. What does it all boil down to, right? And I talked to someone about this the other day. It's still super fascinating to me that this whole idea of like magic internet money is able to like create real world value, right? It blows my mind, right? Like right from the bits and bytes from your computer to like helping someone at war in Ukraine. It blows my mind, and I hope it does yours too, because you have to be realizing how privileged we are to like have access to this kind of technology and work in this domain at this point in time, right? Which I think is super fascinating, right? Be it Dogecoin millionaires to like actual stuff like this. Couple of things that we've done in the past. We've had Gyan, she's done a fundraising for the India COVID relief stuff, which the Polygon team and Sandeep and Jayanti were organizing. and we've contributed to that with the help of DAOs, right? The technology part of this is super fascinating to me because you could almost like, we're used to like the Patreon and the Keto or the Web2 models of fundraising, right, during a charity. And so when it comes to Web3, what does that really mean, right? For every, let's say, you have a smart contract address for a DAO, right, a wallet address for a DAO, which you're putting in, and you're saying that as a creator, every time my NFT is sold, I would proceed to donate like 10% of the sales revenue towards this DAO, right? Same with validators, right? They could automatically like put that wallet address in and say that, okay, for this month, I want all of the validator fees towards this DAO, which I think is amazing, right? You're able to like do it in an instant where you're not thinking about, oh, do I want to like donate to the India COVID relief? Or rather, you're like flipping that narrative to like saying that for every time it's sold, you're only putting a percentage into something like this, which I think is what makes this technology super exciting to me. We've done stuff in Vietnam, China, all around the world in terms of social good causes. And there is also the Unchained Fund, which is a crypto-native fund for the folks in Ukraine, during the war, which you can read about it online as well. So I want to talk about regional hubs as well. The idea of like building localized communities community building is almost like very contextual, if that makes sense. What works in India might not work in China, might not work in Germany, might not work in the US, right? So it's very contextual in terms of how you build communities and have regional communities built out. So which is why we're going up with this initiative of regional guilds. The idea is that they're all independent entities run by entrepreneurs building their own team. So it's sort of like a mini Near foundation, but for a specific region with their specific team. Right? We have a bunch of them active. Again, like each hub is different with their own set of like priorities and goals, right? Because like I said, every region is very focused on the context. And so until you know that, it's very difficult to build out that region. So where in the world are we? This is a very quick slide. Bunch of folks, bunch of places in blue that you can see. Anyone here who's colorblind? You guys can see stuff, right? Okay, cool. Yeah. I felt like the color choices were really poor. But anyway, India is coming soon, very, very shortly. We have a very solid team that's brought on board to lead our efforts in India. And hopefully you should see and hear from them very, very soon. The biggest complaint that I often hear from the Near community is that why are you guys not actively participating at events and hackathons and hacker houses and stuff while a lot of others are doing this, right? We're going to change that hopefully very, very soon, and that will be starting with the India team. Education, I think this is a very important topic to address in this space in terms of onboarding individuals to, Near as well as the larger Web3, right? As much as there is this idea of like competition, I think the pie is very cliche, right? The pie is large enough for everyone to participate, but I truly believe in that. I think you're sort of building this narrative by like onboarding the next billion people into the space, and the tech is sort of enabling that, right? With user-friendly usernames. For instance, my wallet address is Shreyas.near, which is simple to remember, right? As opposed to 01x38, whatever. So I think education plays a very key role in what we're trying to do. And so we have Near.university. If you're new to the Web3 space, go check them out to get a feeler of like what Near is. We have our own in-house content as well as content created by Near fellows, Near graduates. We have a Near certified developer program as well. So if your thing is certification, which is huge in the Indian and Asian community, if you want to look cool in front of your peers, there is a course that you can take and get certified on Near. 20 plus programs, $1.75 million issued in grants as well. If you coming to grants, right? If you're building something cool and if you want funding for it, we are giving you funding for it. You're in luck. Go to near.org/grants. They have a playbook. Without even interacting with a human, you'll be able to see what sort of process it is to get a grant, what grants are funded, what are the priorities and all of that, right? Which I think is amazing that you don't have to interact with a single human, which if you're introverted like me, you would really appreciate. So yeah, that's the grants. We also have NearCon in Lisbon, Portugal this year. So if you are privileged enough to hold a Schengen visa, which is still valid, definitely apply for NearCon. Or check it out and participate online. We have a hacker track. We have a bunch of different tracks that are available for everyone to sort of participate. But if you have friends in Europe or with a privileged passport, ask them to come to NearCon. Thank you. I think I have about maybe 2 minutes for questions. Yeah, okay. Any questions at all?
We talked about guilds, right?
Yeah.
What is the difference between a community and a guild?
Yeah, it's the same. A guild is a cool way for us to talk about communities. Obviously, the idea of like independence in guilds are a lot more. Again, this is my perceived idea of independence in terms of communities, right? If I say that I'm a near community, as opposed to saying that you can call it whatever you want, right? You can call it a Web3 guild, right? Web3 Goa guild, for instance, right? And gives you that sense of autonomy and like purpose, as opposed to saying that you're affiliated with this brand, right? So I feel like that I would say is the biggest difference in terms of what a guild and a community is. But essentially, we treat them the same. Some of these are on-chain entities, so they have like a DAO or stuff that is unlike fake DAOs that are basically like Discord groups and Telegram groups. No shade on anyone. We have actual DAOs that are actually on-chain with stuff done on-chain. So does that sort of answer your question?
So basically, like guild is community with a predefined purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And that might evolve over time, right? It's not like you will have a purpose for life. It's the idea of like agile software development, right?
Yeah.
When things are not working, you keep updating it. Yeah, 100%.
How near is near university to being a replacement for regular university, traditional university?
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to be a replacement for for regular university. The idea is to, again, this is a very biased view, right? Like it's almost like teaching you Web3 through Near, whereas there's a ton of protocols, there's a ton of stuff happening across the Web3 universe that you can sort of learn. But this is very exclusive to the Near side of things. So if you're interested in something like that, then I think Near University is sort of a great place to start. Okay. Oh, you have a question there?
Yeah. So if I have an open source project, which is a public good, and I do not have an organization backing it, I am the single one behind it, how do I build some kind of community around it so I can get volunteers and like increasable amount of money for continuing that project?
Yeah, I mean, open source community building is not a new problem, right? It's fundamentally existed since people talk about this as like it's a huge thing. Like Mozilla, Wikimedia, Ubuntu has been doing this for ages, right? Without the whole token incentive, because there is an intrinsic motivation why people are coming to like build cool stuff on, right? The idea is trying to figure out where your audience is. Is that Hacker News like? I would say the best way to do that is take up space on the internet, right? Like post about your project on the right places. If that's a subreddit, if that's a Stack Overflow forum, like wherever your target audience is, and get people to talk about this, right? And say that, and give them a call to action, right? If this is something that you're interested in, join here, right? Which could be a mailing list, it could be a Discord, it could be a Telegram, it could be whatever, right? And then it's on you to figure out, okay, what's the sort of incentive, right? Do you give them some tokens, do you give them some USDT, DAI, whatever, at a certain milestone, or are you just like incentivizing them to join? A bunch of things that's very dependent on what you're trying to build, and the incentive model is sort of structured around that. Cool. Do I have more time? It's done? Okay. We can take it offline, yeah. Thank you guys.